Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Voss, Dragon of the Southern Tier. I'm happy to be here with you on this Sunday. That's right, it is January 9th, and I'm happy to be here with you speaking live. And wow, it's been quite a start to the new year, hasn't it? So much has happened in the last week to start the new year, and it's amazing because so much of it is information we knew was going to happen. We knew it was coming, and it's just not good. But we will make the best. 2022 will be an interesting year as we are seeing everything get ready for the 2022 midterm elections. That's going to be the big thing. But there's a lot that's happening that's going to influence it. There's a lot that's happening because of what happened in 2021. And I want to thank everyone for joining us. Now, if this is the first time that you are seeing us, we do a live stream every Sunday, reaching out on all social media to speak to you, and we look forward to hearing your comments. We're going to be talking about a lot of things, and we want to hear your tweets, your chats, and your phone calls to 607-242-1582 to tell us what you think about what's going on. Probably one of the things I want to start off with first, and I will talk about the January 6th event, the quote, hashtag J6. And I want to talk about that and what it means to America and what is insurrection. I want to get to that. But before I start off, I want to remind everyone that, and it's important because the IRS is already letting everyone know about this. As we warned you, here we go. This is the American Family's Plan. This is the Biden-Harris idea to be able to help poor people. This is how they're going to pay for everything that's going to be given away free this year, in part. Right now, if you use Venmo, PayPal, Zelle, any of these kind of online transactions, these online banks, $600. If you spend $600, and that's to pay for anything, guess what? You're now going to be, all your transactions are going to be told to the IRS. $600. Here it is. This is coming from NBC News, that if you total more than $600 a year of making payments because of using Venmo or PayPal or Zelle or any kind of cash app, they're going to tell the IRS. That includes if you are making transactions over the holiday season. Let's say that you decide to sell something on eBay for Christmas, and it's $600. You sell an old couch. You sell an old computer. Doesn't matter what it may be. You sell something, and you sell it, and it's over $600. Guess what? The IRS gets to see your entire PayPal account. They get to see your entire Venmo account. The IRS gets to go into all of your transactions. And if you remember, they were telling you, this is only going to be affecting the poor people. We're not going after the poor people. We're not going after the middle class. We're only going after the ultra rich. They're going after the Jeff Bezos of the world. They're going after the Elon Musks of the world. That's why they're going into your PayPal account. Does that make any sense? Does that sound like they're going after poor people or middle class? Or does it sound like they're going after the ultra rich billionaires who are hiding money? Which one do you think they're going after? Because we told you this was going to happen. We warned you that if they got to pass this budget deal, this spending program of the Biden-Harris administration, that the IRS was coming after you. They hired 86,000 individuals to look at not the millionaires and billionaires in the United States. They're going after you. And we were told, no, that's not going to happen. They wouldn't possibly do that. Here it is. This is NBC, January 6th, that they're going after your PayPal account, your Cash App, your Venmo. That's what the IRS is after. They're after you. And I really want to hear what people think about that. Do you want the IRS in your PayPal account? Because you spent, and it doesn't matter about what you sell, it's anything you pay. If you pay your bank account, you pay for a mechanic, you're paying for any business, anything like that, that checks the box and the IRS gets access, and these companies will give your information to the IRS. Something they never could do before. Because in the past, you would have to have over 200 commercial transactions per year that exceeded $20,000 in value. But that's no longer the case. And there's a big difference between $600 annually in commercial payments. Commercial payments. So you're paying for your internet, you're paying for any of your services, maybe a VPN. What do you call a commercial payment? Any kind of commercial payment. You're paying for things. You spend $600, the IRS gets access to all your transactions. They get to see everything you've been doing. And then we get to trust the government at that point. The same IRS that was going around with an agenda to attack conservatives and Republicans. Yes, the IRS scandal under the Obama-Biden administration, that same IRS now gets to go after you. Let me ask you, do you think that's fair? Do you think that's in your best interest? Is that good for you and for America? You tell me, does that sound like that's going after billionaires? Or is that going after the average American? That's how desperate Democrats are right now. That's how desperate they are to find any kind of way to pay off even a little bit the massive spending that they've been doing. And I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's going to work out into your best interest. Now, if you disagree, if you think I'm wrong, I'm happy to hear your comment. I'm happy to hear you tell me how this is going to affect Elon Musk. How is this going to affect Jeff Bezos or Mark Zuckerberg or Jack Dorsey? Tell me how they are going to be affected by their PayPal transactions. How is this going to hurt them as opposed to hurting you? Because I don't think that's the way it works. I don't think that's how it's going to work. I think it's definitely going to hurt us as the American people. That's my thought there. Let me actually even write that out. I'm going to just write in this comment here. What? My chat channels? Why is that not working? Hang on. It looks like my chat's been disabled for a second. I'm going to try and fix that for you real quick here, folks. Because it should be working. But of course, you know, technology these days. And the internet loves me so. So bear with me as I try and fix that real quick. I apologize. We thought everything was up and running, but it seems not. Some days these things are funny. So I'm really confused by this. Why the internet overlords, well, forget about them. This is really driving me nuts because we were promised that the IRS wasn't doing this to hurt the American people, that this was in your best interest, that this was good for you. I just don't see how that's the case. I just don't see how this is going to help any American citizen. I just don't see it. It doesn't make any sense. And if people are trying to comment right now, please bear with me. I'm trying to fix this in the system right now. And it seems like our comments are down for the moment. But we're going to fix this. Okay. Yeah, it should be up. Should be up for... What do you mean? Sorry. So, as always, folks, you can call into 607-242-1582 to let us know what you think about this. What is it that... What do you feel about the IRS going into your bank accounts? I know we knew this was going to happen. We knew that the IRS could not be trusted, that the government could not be trusted on this issue. But even so, it's aggravating. At least that's me. I think it's aggravating. I think it's insane. And I think this is the wrong thing for the government to be doing. But, you know, what does the government care about what I think? What does the government care about what you think? Obviously, very little. Because they're more than willing to use their power against us to take advantage of the average person. That's what I think. Now, that's just very upsetting. Why is this not going? Hang on, I'm trying to fix my chat because it should be working. But of course it's not. Well, that being said, let's keep going. So that was one of the problems and one of the things to be upset about, because we've started the new year and the new year has started off badly. And I think the stock market reflects that, because the stock market is seeing what is happening. The stock market is seeing the devaluing of our dollar. They're seeing inflation that is going to go higher, 6.8% and going higher. The IRS got to see that just, what was it, on Friday, Joe Biden's out and telling America how great it was. The fourth quarter, we got the unemployment numbers. We're at 3.9% unemployment. I'm sure everybody heard about that. Did you notice that the 3.9% unemployment is a miss? That we were actually supposed to have 422,000 people hired in the month of December, the busiest month, the end of the year, the holiday season, where everyone short-term gets hired. 422,000 people is what the economists were expecting. And you know what we got? 199,000. Almost 250,000 people fewer than had been expected, and 250,000 fewer than what is normal. That's not good for the economy. That's not a good sign. That's a problem. Meanwhile, we have Joe Biden running around saying, this is historic. It's great. Everything is going so well. Because we're at 3.9%. That's a lie. He's playing on the fact that most people read the headlines and don't read the details. But if you read any of the details, you turn around and go, Joe Biden's out of his mind. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Because, yeah, we had 3.9% and we missed. There are fewer people getting hired. We have more people in this nation than we did a year ago. Our economic numbers are as bad, if not worse, than where we were in December of 2021. We're not even talking about 2019. We're talking about 2021. The Biden administration hasn't helped any businesses in America overall. We are in just as bad an economic situation, if not worse, than when we were in 2021. And it's, 2020. We're nowhere near where we were before we had this pandemic. It's just insane. And I should say December 2020. And if we're not comparing everything to 2019, we are in miserable shape. Joe Biden's trying to tell the world that, hey, the economy's so much better now. Things are doing so well. Really? Because all he's done, he's like, we've got 6 million people back to who have started working. That's horrible. Let me explain why. Because it's really simple. We were at 3.6% unemployment. There were more people working, and there were fewer people in America, but more people were working, and we were at 3.6%. He's not even gotten back to the numbers that we started off with. He still hasn't returned to the pre-pandemic levels. He's trying to tell you it's some kind of amazing thing that the people who were working before the pandemic went back to work. But we're supposed to think this is some kind of economic miracle from the Biden-Harris campaign, Biden-Harris organization, administration, that somehow their American family plans to build back better, that this is actually working in your advantage because the same people who were working before the pandemic are going back to work, or at least part of them, not even all of them. And we have 4.5 million people who actually quit their jobs in November. We missed the expectations of people working throughout the entire fourth quarter of 2021. Our economy is in shambles, and the stock market knows it. And that's why stocks are dropping, and they're going to continue to drop, and why inflation is increasing, and it's going to continue to increase. I believe the term is called stagflation. I remember it under Jimmy Carter. We're going right back to those days. We really are. And that's our economy. And I can go into all the deep numbers. I can show you the charts, and people will get bored and they'll walk away because no one likes doing math. Unless you're a math teacher in junior high school teaching algebra, nobody likes doing math. So instead, what we're going to see is a problem. And it's going to get worse, and it's going to get worse. And you're going to pay more and more. What was it? Last week, we had one of the viewers was telling us the cost of food was up 35% for him and his family. 35% increase. Meanwhile, the government's telling you, the Biden administration is telling you, no, it's only up 6.8%. Don't worry, that's only temporary. Yeah, so is wearing a mask. So is a lockdown. This is the new normal, people. There is no returning to normal. This is the normal. 6.8% is your normal inflation rate, and it will go higher. We're talking double digit. And I mean, the government's going to admit it's double digit. It's already there. You know it. You're going to buy gas. You're going out to buy food. You're buying goods for your family and for yourself. The costs are already up. Now, you already know this. The government is slowly trying to get there as they try and hide this, as they use every trick in the book to get CNN and MSNBC and the major news media to cover up the little details like the fact that you're paying more for food, the fact that we missed the economic numbers. And Joe Biden needs a dictionary. Someone, his speechwriters, need a dictionary or a thesaurus to understand what the word success means. Because Joe Biden thinks it's a success when in Afghanistan we leave 479 Americans, if not 2,000, in the hands of Al Qaeda and Taliban and ISIS in the middle of the Middle East, abandoned and left on their own. He thinks that's a success. He thinks that's America doing great. Something that America has never done before. We've never abandoned our people like this before. And he thinks it's a fantastic idea that repeating Saigon and doing it bigger, well, that's, hey, it's Saigon the sequel. We got to do it bigger. And he thinks that's a success. That's something he was cheering about. That's what he was looking forward to. And now he's trying to tell us that, well, the economy is doing fantastic. Everything is beautiful. The economy is in great shape. If only you understood things like Joe Biden does. Because it's a historic day for the economy. Are you really? I don't understand how they get to say these things. I don't understand why they're saying these things. I also don't understand why my chat bed is down. I really don't understand that. Come on. Give me a second. I'm trying to fix this. Whoa. Well, that's not quite right. Sorry, folks. Oh, here goes some of the comments I see people are saying. And thank you. The IRS has become a political tool. Just look at what they said. Hang on. I'm going to try and see if I can fit this onto the screen. Bear with me, folks, because I just found your comments, and for some reason, my system is not showing it to me directly. And so I'm not sure why it's not showing it to me. But I'm trying to get that for you all. I can see some of the comments here. So Ann's mentioned that the IRS has become a political tool. And just look at what they did to targeting the Tea Party a few years ago. You're absolutely correct. Dal agrees with us talking about the economy. Jason's mentioned the unemployment stats are not a solid metric for the stock market. And I didn't know that the digest was new. They have to say, Jason goes on to say, they have to say it's good so they can justify increasing interest rates at a fast rate. Dow mentions filling previously lost job positions is not new job creation. People who could work may have walked away and not be collecting unemployment or not eligible, so that skews the numbers. Hey, hot chicks. It's like going to, Dow says it's like going to the casino with $500, losing $499, and then winning back $499 and saying that you have made a 99% profit. I agree with you. This is insane. Because this is, and we saw this very same thing coming from the Obama administration. If you recall, this is what Obama did to everybody back in the days of the summer of recovery. We were told, and when everyone was getting jobs, when we were recovering from the recession, well, when people went back to work, that's a job that's been created because the government is so great. No, it's not. That's a lie. And that's the way that the government lies to you. This is horrible. We are in a horrible situation right now. And the government they know that this is horrible. And they don't care. And that's the part that really makes me struggle right now, is they don't care. I just don't know what to think about this. Because it's so troubling that we're seeing this. And at the same time, as you can see on the screen right now, we still have a problem in Iraq and Syria. The Biden-Harris administration is continuing to fail in its overseas efforts. And this is part of a domino effect. Because just like how they failed with the economy, they're failing on international policy. And it's not just affecting America, it's affecting the world. We're seeing that in Iraq and Syria, it's Iran that's attacking the United States. They're doing this by proxy. I thought I highlighted it, and I did, but it's gone. So, where is it? These are the United States right now, and a lot of people didn't know this. January 5th, the U.S. troops in Iraq and in Syria were being attacked. They're being attacked by a brand new terrorist organization that is backed by Iran, the global leader of world terror. Iran is using its money and influence to convince people who watched what we did in Afghanistan, to watch how strong Biden is in his Middle East policy, they're now attacking U.S. troops. They're shooting rockets at our troops. Did it work? It doesn't have to work. The Joe Biden administration, the Biden-Harris administration, will back down. We saw that in Afghanistan. All they need to do is actually stand up and fight, and Joe Biden will fold. He did it before. There's absolutely no reason to think he's not going to do it again in the future. So they're attacking us. And this is helping Iran, the very same people that Joe Biden wants to make a deal with, the very same people that Joe Biden wants to go out and he wants to make sure that you're going to support them. He wants to make sure that the Iran nuclear deal happens, and he doesn't care what happens to you for that to happen. And Iran knows it. And Iran is taking advantage of this because it's great for them. Nancy, hello, Nancy. It's good to see you here. It's been a little while. Nancy mentions, hi, Michael. New year. Sick of the Dems and fake news channels sugarcoating numbers on inflation, unemployment, as well as excuses why goods, services are delayed in the U.S. We need to get our Republican Party rejuvenated. Thank you. And I thank you for being here with our audience. Thank you, Nancy. Now, something I want to mention here that I think is important, because a lot of people will mention that, hey, you know, Mike, it's about the economy. Excuse me, it's about Republicans. Republican Party needs to stand up. I'm upset with Republicans as well because they're not standing up strong enough. We're not seeing them in a unified voice saying this can't go on. You know, I'm pretty upset with Ted Cruz. Did you hear what he said about January 6th? I heard what he had to say about January 6th. He called that a terrorist action. It wasn't a terrorist action. I mean, there's no confusion on this. Okay? I want you to think about what Ted Cruz, when Ted Cruz said that January 6th was about the terrorist actions of the United States, he fell right into what Democrats have said about this. And I want you to see what we're talking about here. So this is what we saw coming from the left. Anna Presley saying that there needs to be unrest in the streets. Kamala Harris said that protesters should not let up. These are people talking about the riots throughout the entire United States, the BLM Antifa riots that we got to see, the $2 billion in destruction that burned down cities, whole sections of cities throughout the United States. This is what the left, this is what the Democrats were saying. It was Maxine Waters who said, if you see anybody from the cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, you get out and you create a crowd and you push back on them. Nancy Pelosi said, I just don't know why there aren't uprisings all over the country. Maybe there will be. See, the Democrats were more than happy to see absolute riots, violence, the mostly peaceful protests, in other words, the actually burning down of U.S. cities, the murder of over 36 people, including children, over a dozen children. You know, we're talking about in Atlanta, it was in Atlanta, it was in Portland, it was in Seattle. There were kids that were killed throughout this entire nation. They were happy about that. They were excited about that. Can you imagine that? And they're upset now. The Democrats are upset now because Fox News was number one on January 6th. Even though CNBC and MSNBC were busy screaming at you that this was terrorism, that this was a terror attack, that this was the destruction of democracy, even as we had Kamala Harris tell us that the January 6th and what happened on January 6th, 2021 was the same thing as D-Day and World War II and 9/11. Are you kidding me? That's the comparison that they want to make, and they're telling you this And meanwhile, the nation turned around and said, no, we don't want to hear what you have to say. We don't want to hear this propaganda coming from CNN and MSNBC. Mind you, you could also say that Fox News was putting on its own propaganda, but the reality is, at least I believe the reality is, that there is no way in the world you can look at what happened with January 6th and then turn around and say, well, that was terrorism. That was the same thing as 9/11. That was the same thing as what happened in when Pearl Harbor was attacked. It's not on that scale. It's not on that scale at all. As someone who was alive when we saw Manhattan attacked, as someone who was in Manhattan on September 11th, who worked in the Helmsley building and was terrified that we were about to be attacked and that was going to be one of the next targets, as someone who was walking around Manhattan with a couple million people trying to figure out what was going on as everything shut down, I can tell you, January 6th was nothing like 9/11. I understand there are people in the audience who are watching this who are 20-somethings. They were born they were born because of September 11th. They have no idea, September 11th, 2001. They have no idea. I was alive then. And I can tell you, there was a massive difference between the two. Even on the news, there was a massive difference between the 2 hours at the Capitol and the days of impact of 9/11. But somehow the Democrats, Nancy Pelosi, they want you to think that no, they're exactly the same thing. You know what? What happened on January 6th isn't even the same thing as what happened when a bunch of Democrats, when the far left went to Washington, D.C. in May of 2020. Do you remember? Because I'm sure you didn't see this on CNBC. I'm sure this wasn't on CNN. I'm sure the far left, the news media, the Times, they don't want to show you what the far left was doing in Washington, D.C., which was far more violent and far more aggressive than what we saw on January 6th. The only difference being that back on May 2020, they didn't make it into the Capitol. And on January 6, 2021, a lot of people were just let into the Capitol. The doors were open. There were police, Capitol Police, just letting people in. And that's besides the fact of the violence that came from the Capitol Police. That's just a fact. But yet we have them trying to tell us this. I want you to say, here, you think, Mike, you're just downplaying what happened because it was so violent. Okay, you know what? Let's take a look at this. If you think I'm downplaying this, this is from the Washington Post. This is the destruction in D.C. after the riots from the far left in Washington, D.C. This is from June of 2020. Please take a look at this. Do you see those cars? Do you see the fires? Did you see that on January 6th of 2021? Did you see this kind of destruction and mayhem? Did you see buildings like this? Did Washington, D.C., did the businesses in the region, were they destroyed on January 6th of 2021? Were fires set in businesses? This is coming from the Washington Post. Did we have this kind of chaos on January 6th in 2021? Did we have people looting and rioting in Washington, D.C. on January 6th, 2021? And again, this is coming from the Washington Post. I am going to the left-leaning news media so that I can tell you what they say, what they're showing. And, just in the comments here, we can see Dow's mentioning the storming of Kavanaugh hearings. Yes, I remember the storming of the Kavanaugh hearings. This didn't happen when we saw people down on January 6th. in 2021. It's not the same. By the way, I want to be clear here. What we're seeing on the screen right now, this isn't the same as what happened on D-Day. This isn't the same thing as when Pearl Harbor was struck. This isn't the same thing as 9/11. They're not. So when the left wants to tell us that it's the same thing, that there's all this looting, they were nothing. So I don't care what you want to, even these riots in Washington, D.C. were not the same. But we had Kamala Harris and we had Joe Biden going on national TV trying to tell you that this wasn't as bad as a bunch of people being let into, when they were just let into the Capitol building, where we had millions of dollars of destruction in 2020, and we had thousands of dollars. We had a couple of desks that were destroyed because someone took a dump on Nancy Pelosi's desk. We had a couple of windows in some doors that were broken. That's it. There were over 300,000 people at and surrounding the Capitol on January 6th of 2021. That is a fact. In fact, the number might be 600,000. 600. It's hard to tell, and not all sources are clear on that, but somewhere between 300,000 and 600,000 Americans were standing in front of the Capitol with 1,000 people or so that were actually in the Capitol building. If they wanted to take over the government, they would have. That's a fact. That's not even a question. It's not like, ooh, maybe. When you have that many people, and if they wanted to take over, they would have. That's just a fact. But they weren't trying to do that. And in all the video footage, and you have to look beyond the edits that are being done by CNN as they try and convince you of this in 30 seconds, rather than actually showing you video that is readily available on the internet that shows hours upon hours of coverage. There are hundreds of thousands of people there. But somehow we're supposed to think that January 6th was the most violent attack on our democracy that has ever existed. Are you kidding? Are you serious? Because it sounds like a lie. It's not true. Let me take a second here, and I want to explain something to you guys. I want to share something with everybody. A lot of people may know this. Some of the viewers may not. I have lived in Russia. I've lived in Moscow. I lived in Tbilisi, and I lived in Riga. This was in 1991. And in 1991, there was a coup attempt. So I've actually lived through an actual coup attempt. I've seen it happen. I've been there in person. In 1991, in Moscow, there was a coup attempt. A group called the RFGC, which is in Russian, and yes, I do speak some Russian. They came together. They are hardline communists. They were upset because Mikhail Gorbachev, was taking, the Russian president at the time, was trying to make Russia more democratic, to get away from the communist system, to open up economically the system so that the people of Russia would be able to buy food in even a slight way similar to what we saw here. That he brought in McDonald's, the largest McDonald's in the world, into Moscow. And because of that, the hardline communists hated him. I mean, they hated him. And so they captured him and they tried to take out the government. And I want you to understand, when you hear Nancy Pelosi say, well, this was January 6th was a coup attempt. Okay, in Moscow in 91, when they made the coup attempt, there were tanks in Moscow. They were rolling down the streets. The government was armed to the teeth. They had military units out across the country, and in particular in Moscow. In Moscow, for well over 3 days, we had all phone lines cut, including international phone lines. You had the embassies were unable to make normal communications through the phone across the country. I spent on the first day of the coup attempt, I spent 8 hours trying to call someone in the United States to let them know that I was alive. We were under imminent threat. Every expatriate, everyone who was working and living in Moscow that wasn't a Russian. There were many of us, people from Germany, from England, from Australia. We were all together, Ireland. We were all working in Moscow at the time. And we were hearing about the rumors, and we believe it's very true, that both Russians and expatriates were being gathered up and taken into gulags by the KGB because they were going back to hardline communism, and being a businessman in Moscow was considered being a spy. And so they were trying to lock up everyone as they were trying to take over the country. That is a coup. I lived that. I saw that. I watched the tanks roll down the street. I saw when the people came out to protest against that. When we saw hundreds, actually a couple thousand people came out in front of the Russian White House, which is off of Kuduzovsky Street. And they blocked off the road with buses, and they were out there standing and protesting as tanks rolled down the street, telling them that they were going to shoot them. That's what a coup is like. And you want to know, that's one of the least bloody coups, whether attempted or successful, that we have ever seen in the world. But that was the one I personally got to watch happen day after day, night after night, in person there. And I'm listening to Nancy Pelosi telling me that January 6th was the same thing as that. Have you looked at the Philippines? Have you looked around the world to see what is, in fact, an actual coup attempt? Of course she hasn't. She has no idea what she's talking about. They have no idea what they're talking about. They want you to think it's some kind of horror show. No, it isn't. Not even close. There was no comparison because it wasn't a coup attempt. Now, you can tell me, Mike, well, this was something that was criminal, that they broke in, it was breaking and entry, that they should be charged with a crime. Fantastic, go ahead. But if you want to tell me it's an insurrection, I have a very simple question for Nancy Pelosi, for the Democratic Party, for Joe Biden, who want to tell me that this was the worst thing that ever happened to America. If it's so bloody terrible, if it's so dangerous to America, why has there been zero? Not one person has been charged with treason. Not one person has been charged with insurrection. Not one person has been charged with the 57 different laws in the United States for domestic terrorism. Not one. If it's supposed to be this insurrection, this terrorist, this treason, if that's what it was supposed to be, then yes, we heard Senator Ted Cruz say it was. Okay, if it was, then why is there not one person who has been charged with treason, insurrection, and or 57 different counts of domestic terrorism? The laws exist. The language is there in our legal system. They've arrested 725 people. They have held approximately 450 of those people in jail for a year, and not one charge has been made. 40 people have pled guilty to breaking and entering. 40 people so far. 45 people, I believe, have been made plea bargains and said they were guilty for breaking and entering, and they still don't have one person who has been charged with treason or insurrection or domestic terrorism. Every time that it has come up in the sentencing, and every time it has been put forth by the judges and the legal system saying, well, why don't we charge these people with actual insurrection if we charged them as if this was a coup. In every single case, the Department of Justice prosecutors have said, no, we won't charge that. And so we're supposed to think that this is an insurrection, that this was some kind of horrible crime in America. It makes no sense. James mentions federally charged for offending King George, which is a reference back to this creation of the United States. See, I'm saying this because I want you to understand the difference here, the difference of what we are being told happened, what we see happened, and what we see that the left is more than happy to allow to happen. And what they're telling us is the reality. It's, oh God, it's so aggravating to me. I have to tell you that if you've ever been in a coup attempt, you're going to be terrified. You know that at any given moment, you're going to die. That's exactly how it feels. And I think you can, not only can I say that for myself, I believe that, and that's what, let me slow down. Having been in the Moscow coup attempt in 1991, having lived through that moment, and knowing that at any given moment, not only could I, but all the people I was working with who were natural-born Russian citizens, and all the business owners that I knew, and all the businesses I was interacting with, both those internationally and in Russian nationals themselves, at any moment, we were expecting to all die. We were expecting to be thrown into a gulag and disappear, kind of like the Uyghurs in China right now. They disappear forever, kind of like the Hong Kong government. They disappeared forever because China just made them disappear. And that's what we were being told was happening and was going to happen to every single one of us in Moscow in 1991. I guarantee you, you knew the difference. The people around Russia, in Latvia, in Riga, in just every part of Russia, was getting the news that their world had just changed, that the government was coming after them, each and every individual, because they weren't communist enough. That was 1991. That was the coup attempt then. That's not like the overturns of governments that we saw in the Philippines, that we've seen in Southeast Asia, that's happened in, hell, just look in the southern South America. There's such a big difference in terms of lives that are lost, in terms of property damage, in terms of the changes of government. And I don't think the internet overlords like me talking about this, but I want you to understand that there is no way you can compare the two things. And truly, if it were a bunch of people who were uncoordinated but yet determined to take over the government, you know, there's a great saying that came out. I was the podcast of the Lotus Ears, which is a British political commentary channel. They had some great insight, and they speak from the United Kingdom, and they had a very interesting thing to say about this. So January 6th was about a bunch of Americans taking over the American government to replace it with America. Think about that for a second. They were trying to replace America with America. That this really wasn't this was nowhere near the magnitude that they wanted to make it. And that's why everyone was watching Fox News instead of watching CNN and MSNBC. Because honestly, CNN and MSNBC were trying to lie to you. There was no point, according to, and this is coming from MSN.com. So again, I'm going to a left-leaning source on this. This isn't Fox talking about it. This is MSN. This is the left talking about this event. And they can tell you that Nielsen Media showed that CNN did not hit 1.5 million viewers at any hour in the day on January 6th. And Fox News beat CNN and MSNBC. And MSNBC didn't have anything. And Fox averaged 2.8 million viewers for the day, hour after hour. No one was watching what NBC and CNN had to say, because no one wanted to watch the propaganda. No one wanted to see them lie to your face, because you were alive. If you're watching this program right now, you were alive on January 6th of 2021. You saw everything that changed. It's insane. There was no one who was sitting around in Topeka, Kansas, that thought that the government was coming after them. There was no one in, Albany, New York, that thought that, oh my God, there's a coup, so the Albany government will no longer exist. The American dollar will not exist. There was no one in San Francisco on January 6th that was watching that and going, oh my God, you know what? The state of California will no longer exist. No one had that thought. We thought it was an incredibly terrible riot. We thought that this was an incredibly dangerous situation, but no one thought that America was going to cease existing. That came afterwards. That came from the promotion, the sloganing, the Democrats trying to take advantage of every crisis. That's what they say. Hang on. And I see John. Hey, John, it's good to hear from you. John says, sadly, MSNBC, CNN, NBC together is larger than Fox. Yes, together they are, but people really are tuning this out because there are more than enough people who have seen what's going on around the world and pay attention to the details of what's happening around the world that they realize this isn't real, that this is just propaganda, that this is the far left trying to take advantage of people and trying to use their emotions against them. By the way, if you're on the left, if you're someone who thinks that January 6th was an insurrection, 607-242-1582. You are more than happy to call in and try and explain to me what the connection is or how we can compare January 6th to 9/11. I'm not even going to go back to World War II because that's just stupid on its face. It makes no sense. And again, I will say, someone has to have a dictionary or a thesaurus in Washington, D.C., and they need to look up some of the terms that they're using here because they don't know what the hell they're talking about. They really don't. But if you want to come in, if you want to tell me that January 6th was an act of treason and you're comparing it to September 11th, as Kamala Harris did on national TV and Joe Biden confirmed, then please call in and tell me how they are the same thing. Because I have been alive for both. And I have been in a coup attempt in Moscow in 91. And I can tell you they're nothing alike. That it's not the same and it isn't what happened. But I am willing to hear the voices that tell me, Mike, you just don't understand. John Cordisco mentions that democracy hangs in the balance, so we get the Hamilton cast singing. Are you kidding me? Bellin mentions there is no comparison. James mentions January 6th and 9/11, both false flags at half staff. James, I can't say 9/11 is a false flag. I won't say that. But what I will say is that this is, I don't even know. It gets me so upset and I lose my composure. I get upset and I lose track of what I want to say because I want to say so much so quickly. And I have to be careful about how I say it because the internet overlords don't like this kind of discussion. But there is no way that we can look at the world. Forget about my personal experiences, although I'm more than happy to tell you, and I have spoken about what I experienced in Moscow when I was living there in 1991. And the nature of what happened in the coup attempt when the Aref Gesek tried to take over. I'm more than happy to go into that with anyone and try and see that. I was alive. I was in the Helmsley building in New York City, in Manhattan, on 9/11, as planes hit the Twin Towers, and watched it. I could see the Twin Towers. I was on the 33rd floor. We could see the Twin Towers from looking out the windows. And you want to tell me that what I saw in January 6th is the same as that? That is both, not only is it insulting, not only is it inaccurate, it's abysmal. I can't share how much anger that this provides to me, how angry this makes me. When I get to hear Nancy Pelosi, when I get to hear the Democrats line up and try and tell me one after another, trying to say, but you just don't understand. You're just not smart enough. See, their answer is, you're not smart enough to know what a coup is. I think I am. Not only because I'm an American citizen, not only because I've been educated, not only because I've gone to college, I've gone to high school, not only because I can read a book, but because I can read a newspaper. I've seen what's gone on around the world. I've seen these attempts at coups and successful coups throughout the world, throughout 53 years of my life. I think I have a clue. So John mentions their first goal is to disqualify over 130 Republican congressional candidates. Disqualify them under the 14th Amendment, Section 3. That's what's coming. By not certifying the electoral votes, they want to, we're getting into a section I really can't discuss there without the channel being shut down. Sorry, John. I understand where you're going, but I can't comment on that. But what I want to say is they're using this crisis to push forward an ideology that most Americans do not have. In fact, only 7% of Democrats in the Democratic Party actually believe in far-left politics. Only 7% are part of the fringe, the progressive ideology, the Democratic Socialists. It's only 7% of the Democratic Party. But they're very loud voices. And we're seeing Democrats trying to appeal to that small group of people and to take advantage of the news media being more than willing to promote that ideology. And when they do that, you and I suffer. It's one of the reasons why we have the IRS looking at your PayPal account because you spent $600 paying for electricity. You bought a camera. You bought whatever. $600. You spent $600 in a year, and now your entire PayPal account is open to the IRS so they can see every single transaction to see where your money went in and went out, not only so that they can charge you more in taxes, but now the government can micromanage your life. And we're so busy talking about January 6th that no one's paying attention to the fact that the government is putting a microscope to your life economically and seeing everything that you are doing. And there are people in the government who are willing to punish you for not being just like them. We saw it with Lois Lerner. We're seeing it right now. We've seen it on Twitter on a daily basis. That should upset people because that's the real, if there's any kind of insurrection going on, isn't it when the government is micromanaging your life and becoming more and more authoritarian? When we have groups of people inside the government, inside institutions in our government that are using their power, the power of the federal government, to beat up on the average American citizen. Isn't that more troubling? Isn't that something we should be paying attention to? But instead, they're trying to distract us and tell us something completely different. John mentions that Germany's 1930s minority took over, as well as the Chinese communist minority, 1917 Russian minority, all minority of population. Well, John, that's not entirely correct. The 1930s in Germany, there was a vote. They were elected into office. It wasn't minority of people, although it wasn't the majority of people. It wasn't a minority in that sense where it's just a handful of people. They were voted into office. Looking at 1917 Russia, it wasn't really a minority of people either. There was a large upswelling of the Russian people to go up against the czars for what they had done. That's not exactly correct. Jeremiah mentions, so sad, actually beyond sad and more like horrid, like Orwellian, actually that you can't discuss or talk about something for fear of being shut down. I know you're not afraid in the general sense of the word, but more fear of losing the power of the program and service you provide to we who live behind the enemy lines in New York State and other liberal orders, free lands near and far. And Jeremiah, you're very much correct. And I want to be very clear for people who don't get it. No matter all the difficulties that I get, the suppression that we see that comes from YouTube and Facebook and the internet overlords, the channel is shut down. There's delays that are put into it. There's difficulties in getting this content, like your comments, up onto the screen. These things happen and have been happening for years. We have seen Republican after Republican, and trust me, conservative after conservative. We've even seen people who are Democrats who don't say exactly the right words get destroyed. They have been unpersoned. And my concern here is mostly about the fact that it's not that I'll disappear. I've been doing this for 15 years. I'm not going to lose money. I don't make any money in doing this. I don't get paid to do this. I actually spend my money every year to do this, to be able to have these conversations with you. So it would actually save me money if they were to actually shut me down, but that's not the thing. It's that it would limit the voice. Now, yes, I am on Rumble. I'm on Odyssey. I'm on BitChute, as well as being here on YouTube and Facebook and Twitter and DLive. But most people aren't on those other platforms. Most of people don't see those other platforms. And therefore, your freedom of speech is chilled. It is destroyed. Because when people around the world are looking to find out what's happening in America, to understand what's going on, to share ideas and to share news and information like I am right now with you, they don't know where to go. When people are looking at the shining beacon of America, they're going to look to Facebook, they're going to look to YouTube, they're going to listen to Google, they're going to check out the mainstream major media because that's all they know. If they're lucky, that's all they know. In North Korea, where you have Kim Jong-un, who is firing off hypersonic missiles while his public starved to death, and the internet is shut down on a regular basis, and you can only get the internet that they allow you to have. In China, where the Chinese Communist Party actually monitors every internet connection, and they restrict what the public can see and to say. Even movies that are brought into the country have to be re-edited. Look at The Last Jedi. They will edit things to even be able to come into the country in any format, whether it's digital or in person. These hyper-restrictive countries where the hope of people to one day be free comes from their illegal access to the internet, to be able to get to YouTube and to maybe get through the filters and to hear a comment like this one. And I do know there are some people in China that watch this program, whether that's the government of China, the Chinese communists watching this and being upset because I'm telling you communism sucks, or whether it's individuals who are breaking the system, hear a voice of freedom because Americans are free. I don't know. And so I got to protect that. I worry about that strongly. So yes, that's why I try and balance sometimes the words that I say. It's not because of what I'm saying. It's because I don't want you, the viewer, the audience, to be denied the opportunity to hear at least what can be said. But it is incredibly restrictive. It is incredibly insulting. It is a destruction of the Second Amendment. Bellin mentions that we have a Second Amendment to protect all of our rights. Not according to the Ninth Circuit Court, you don't. And we've covered that on this channel before. The Ninth Circuit Court doesn't believe that you have the right to bear arms outside of your home. You don't have the right to protect yourself outside of your home according to the Ninth Circuit Court. That is a fact. So that's kind of dangerous. Mr. X says, cool. I'm on those other platforms. I'm glad. I'm on all. I try to be as diverse and have as much content out there as possible. But it's difficult. And even on those platforms, like on Odyssey, I have over 1,300 videos that I've done in the last 10 years. They edit that. So you can only see, I think it's 135 videos right now, and they won't show every video that I do, and they won't show the live streams. So there is that. But I'm glad you're on the other platforms, just in case this one ever goes away. So, yes, I'm on Getter, I'm on Parler, I'm on almost all of the different formats that are out there, but we shouldn't have to be. See, that's one of the things that gets me is people say, well, you can just go to another platform. We shouldn't have to go to another platform because we're being silenced. Look, I understand if you're not doing something that is criminal, okay, take out criminal action, take out actual pornography. We can agree on that. Throw those things out. To the ability to say, I don't like Joe Biden, as an example. Or if you wanted to say, I don't like President Trump. Or I don't like Jimmy Carter. I don't care which president it may be. Here's the thing. If you're being censored because of the names I just mentioned, if you can't say Jimmy Carter, that you didn't like President Jimmy Carter, if you can't say that, and that's the only problem, and that because that internet overlord doesn't like you saying, I didn't like Jimmy Carter as president, that is censorship of the greatest order. That's not freedom. That's not an intellectual conversation. It's not a discussion. No one advances when you stop people from being able to speak about something. That's the thing that I think CNN and MSNBC and the New York Times and the Washington Post, when they're doing their coverage of January 6th, trying to convince the American people, which they failed at, but they've been trying to convince the American people that there was an insurrection that wasn't an insurrection by definition, by example around the world, by every standard you could use, it wasn't an insurrection, yet they're trying to convince you of that so that they can then censor you and restrict your freedoms and deny you choices. I think the American people are smart enough to see that and go, that doesn't make any sense. I do not agree with that. I refuse to accept that. Because the answer is, well, January 6th was this is all about politics. January 6th was an insurrection, so you can't vote for X. You can't vote for Trump. You can't vote for conservative Republicans. You can't vote for people who say that this wasn't an insurrection. You can't vote for those people. This is about politics. This is about restricting your freedom. This is about denying you choice and denying you the ability to voice your opinion. It is authoritarian. I mean, you can tell me you think I'm wrong, folks. I'm more than happy. You can call on 607-242-1582. The phone line is on. If you think I'm out of my mind, that I don't get it, that I don't understand it, that the implications are just not what I'm talking about, you're not coming to the same conclusion that I am happy to hear you. You will not be insulted. You will not be embarrassed. I will listen to everything you have to say in a logical discussion to hear why you think I am wrong, why I and it seems the majority of Americans are wrong when we say that wasn't an insurrection. It was a riot. Yes, crimes did occur. Yes, we should punish people for the crimes they did, but it was not an insurrection. It is not the political theater that is being presented to us. Not in any way, shape, or form. No reasonable person will come to that conclusion based on the evidence that exists. And if you want to debate that with me, I am perfectly happy to have that debate, to have that discussion, to listen to your evidence to show me that. But when I look at Ashley Babbitt, who was killed, and it looks like when you look at the full video of how she got shot, that she was surrounded by police in body armor who had AR-15s. Those police who were surrounding the room she was in retreated, and a Capitol police officer stuck a gun out and shot her in the neck in the direct line of sight and in the cone of fire that the police were in. When they hit Ashley Babbitt, if the police didn't retreat, they would have been shot. And then after she was shot, those same police officers who are on the stairs then come up and then control the room again. I'm telling you, that is a setup. And that's what we're seeing with all of the January 6th coverage that is coming out of the mainstream major media. You can tell me you don't agree, and that's perfectly fine. But let's have that discussion then. Because CNN, MSNBC, Nancy Pelosi, Joe Biden, Chuck Schumer, Kamala Harris, they don't want that. They want a spectacle to be in front of your face. They want you to think that they are the only ones who have the right voice and no other voice should be heard, and that you have to agree with them or you are an evil person. Their logic is completely circular. It is called a fallacy, and they are trying to convince you of this so that they can maintain power. And you should be very upset about that. Whether you're a Democrat or not, the tactics that are being used to maintain power should trouble you. I don't care if you're a Democrat, a Libertarian, a Republican, anyone who uses the circular logic that silences any voices of opposition should trouble American citizens and anyone who believes in freedom. Because that's not how you do that. And I don't care if you can be a Democrat. Fantastic. Be a Democrat. I don't care. But that doesn't give you a right to be silencing other people. Same thing I would say for libertarians, Republicans, conservatives, and anyone else. You don't get to silence other people that you don't agree with. And yet, that is exactly what we're being told right now. And that's troubling for the entire country. You know what's the worst part about that? There isn't even a trade-off or a benefit for it. Let's assume that we have to shut down the right. Conservatives and Republicans have to be shut down. Their voices have to be eliminated. Okay. And let me ask you, if you shut down the voices of Republicans and you shut down the voice of conservatives and libertarians, what are you going to get as a benefit for that? You're going to have illegal aliens come into your neighborhoods, stealing property and committing acts of felony and fraud, as we can see here. This is from the Binghamton homepage, I believe it's WETM. This is their reporting out of Owego, New York. An illegal alien from Cuba committed 28 felony fraud, or is alleged to have committed 28 felony frauds. And we're not supposed to talk about illegal immigration. Because if you're silencing the right, if you're silencing the voices that oppose the democratic socialist ideology, the progressive ideology, if you're supposed to be part of the bluer than blue leadership of New York State, which is a single party rule, there is no other voice in New York State other than Democrats, and Democrats have decided that they will violate the United States federal laws and turn New York State into a sanctuary city where it is free game for illegal aliens. We are willing to give illegal aliens the ability to vote in our elections in New York State. That is how crazily to the far left we are. And as a result, what do we get? We get illegal aliens committing 28 frauds. That's second degree. That's possession forged instruments in the second degree, possession of burglary tools, petite larceny, multiple cases of this, and that is just one example of it. We also get to see that kids are being shot in our schools, like in Binghamton, New York. This is the third case in less than 3 months where we have kids shooting kids. An 18-year-old was shot by a 17-year-old. And we have a councilwoman, a Democrat, Angela Riley, Councilwoman Angela Riley, who is trying to defund the police. She is in charge of the 3rd District in Binghamton. She is promoting defunding the police as we are seeing the level of violence, of gunfights and shootouts and people being murdered is going up in her district, in Binghamton, New York. This isn't California. This isn't in Washington, D.C. It's not Chicago or Baltimore. In Binghamton, New York, a small, tiny microcosm of New York State, similar to the rest of the United States, and we are watching the violence ramp up. Even though we have red flag laws, which are supposed to stop all this violence, we have the New York Safe Act, which is supposed to stop all this violence, even though we are an anti-Second Amendment state, according to the Democrat-leaning or Democrat-controlling state legislature, even though we have every one of these kind of gun control measures, these anti-Second Amendment measures, we are watching the violence ramp up. That this is becoming more and more deadly for citizens. And then they tell us, well, you shouldn't be talking about that. You're on the right, so it's your fault. It's your fault for speaking about these things. And you should just comply. Just do what we say, and it will be okay. We'll just get rid of the police, and it will be okay. You liars. That's not what's happening. And I do denounce Councilwoman Angela Riley, who is more than busy and happy enough today to go onto Twitter to talk to the people, to talk to the public about icy roads, and has not mentioned any of the problems that have been going on in her community that she is responsible for. And if you think I am making that up, hello, here is Councilwoman Angela Riley's page. She is in charge of the 3rd District of Binghamton. She's a city councilwoman. This is her tweet today about icy roads. This is her Twitter account. Please stop me when you see her talking about the shooting that just happened in Binghamton, New York, in her district. By the way, we're in November. This is November 15th. January 1st, December 30th. I'm in the old year. When did this happen? This happened on January 7th, 2 days ago. 2 days ago. And this councilwoman has nothing to say about what's happening in her own community. And you know why? Because Angela Riley supports defunding the police. She supports progressive leaders of tomorrow. She supports the Antifa and BLM. She is a radical. I believe she is a radical Democrat, a socialist Democrat, a progressive, absolutely, and that she doesn't care. And she doesn't think the public cares. And that's the trade-off. So I should be shut down because I'm going to call out this politician in my community who is responsible for trying to make my community more safe. And people will say, well, you should be shut down. You can't speak to her like that because she's a black woman. Guess what? I'm a black man. I'm a black Hispanic man. So what? That's got nothing to do with it. She's an elected official whose policies that she is calling for, which is defunding the police, would make the public less safe. She's in power, and she won't even talk about what is actually happening to the people here. She cares so little. And I'm showing you the evidence of it right now. And I guarantee you, this isn't just happening here. This isn't just happening in New York State. It's not just a Binghamton thing. We are seeing this across the country. John mentions their position is this: anything goes in fighting evil, thus anything they do is justified. It's that simple. I don't agree with that. I think that they may believe that, but it's just a lie. You know, we see lots of criminals, lots of evil people who say, well, I'm justified because they are the bad person. No, that's just called crazy. That's called that's a paranoid person, maybe even schizophrenic. Jeremiah mentions those 3-letter agencies that were present and stoked the violence need to be held accountable. No longer a rule for me and a rule for thee should be tolerated. No advocating or executing of physical violence, rather verbal, photographic, evidentiary, and similar fighting. Think of the Project Veritas on steroids. Things like what I do by holding people accountable and being relentless in sacrificing your time, money, and safety to speak out and provide a platform for all our voices. In speaking about Angela Riley, Jeremiah goes on to say probably supports the racially motivated medical treatment of COVID also. Yes, as I understand, yes, the councilwoman does believe in that as well. So I find this upsetting, folks. And again, this goes back to the same logic that happened on January 6th. It's the same logic that has brought us the restrictions on the Second Amendment and the attempts to destroy that. They're the same mentality that says we have to change the number of judges in the Supreme Court to ensure that they are able to maintain their power base. This is all about politics. This is all about power. And you are suffering for it because what was the inflation rate again? 6.8% and going higher. How much are people paying? How much are you paying more for meat than you were just 6 months ago? 35%? That's why this is important. Because people say, well, it's just about politics. I don't pay attention to that. Politics pays attention to you. When you don't pay attention to politics, it still affects you. Doesn't matter if you care or not, because politics cares about you. The government is micromanaging your life. The government is going into your bank accounts, and they are seeing what you do. They are micromanaging your life more and more and more. And whether it's a medication from the pandemic, or whether it's your bank account, or speaking online, the government is getting more and more restrictive. That is a fact. And that government that is doing that, it's not right-leaning. I can tell you that. It's left-leaning. And that's kind of scary. That's terrifying. And it's aggravating. It's not in the best interest of America. Truly, it isn't. But, maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. And you're perfectly fine to tell me, Mike, you just don't understand. Okay, maybe I don't understand. Please explain. Tell me. Why don't I get it? Nope, that's not it. That's the wrong thing. Trying to check my system here, folks. Nope, that's the wrong one too. Sorry. Technology's messing with. Hey, we got them back. Comments are back. I don't know, folks. It's very upsetting for me. And I hope this episode is making sense. I'm trying to tie together a bunch of things because we have big problems going on. As we are being lied to, as we are being distracted by things like the Nancy Pelosi and the government trying to convince us that January 6th was an insurrection, which would then empower that same existing government, that left-leaning government, to stay in power because they're going to limit the number of people who can run against them. They're going to limit the number of voices the public gets to hear and to make a different decision. We're seeing crazy stuff happening around the world. And by the way, I want you to understand, this is just like what's happening in our colleges. As I showed you at SUNY Broome, where I was at one of their events, which were teaching critical race theory applied programs, when they did that, they did that by saying, here's the only track you can be on. White people are racist. Black people are victims. There is no other discussion. There is no other conversation you can have. There is no other evidence. There is no other materials. There are no other discussions. You only get to say white people are racist and black people are victims. And that was exactly the entire event at SUNY Broome. And we showed you the literal word for word, everything that was going on in that event. And at no point could you get off of that track and say, well, maybe I don't agree with that. You had no choice. You had to go down the road and go to the same endpoint. That's what they're doing here with our lives. You have no choice. All of the media is trying to convince you, all the major media, is essentially trying to teach you and tell you that there is only one answer, and that answer must be what they say. And if you disagree with that, you have to be unpersoned, you have to be unfriended, you have to be silenced. That's not freedom. And the more and more that we have this non-freedom, oh God, sorry, I just saw one of the bots slip through, don't know how. But the more and more that we have this non-freedom that's going on, the more and more we get to see events like this one. And let me show you. Kazakhstan, according to the BBC, 164 people were killed. See, this is an insurrection. By the way, Nancy Pelosi, MSNBC, CNN, this is an insurrection. 164 people were killed when the government decided to stop protests. That's crazy. That's a government out of control. With the support of the Russian government came into Kazakhstan because America is so busy trying to convince you and me that there was an insurrection and we should vote Democrat, because that's really what this is about. They're so busy trying to convince us to vote Democrat that they're not really caring that Kazakhstan is falling, that the Ukraine is trying to be absorbed, that the former Soviet Union is being put back together piece by piece. God, I thought I turned it off. That they're putting back together the old Soviet Union. And Joe Biden doesn't even know what to do about it. He has no clue what's going on there. This is, you think I'm wrong about that. Time magazine. The U.S. is the United States is willing to strike a deal with Russia over missiles and military exercises as the Ukraine crisis deepens. Really? Yes, really. The Secretary of State Blinken cautioned Russia of the massive, quote unquote, massive consequences should it invade the Ukraine. He stopped short of threatening U.S. military action, which is a big stop, but promised sweeping economic sanctions and added military support to Ukrainian forces. Quote, we're prepared to respond forcefully to further Russian aggression, but a diplomatic solution is still possible and preferable if Russia chooses it. That's what we, together with our allies and partners, will continue to pursue intently. In other words, the United States isn't going to do a bloody thing. In other words, the reports from last week and the week before that the Biden administration wants the Ukraine to appease Russia and to give up more of its land and to become less independent. That's what the Joe Biden administration wants to do. That Joe Biden doesn't have the balls to just even say, hey, if you attack and you enter the Ukraine, the United States is going to send troops in. Even if you know that's a lie, just to say it to hold up Russia, to make them think twice. But we already know Vladimir Putin laughs in the face of Joe Biden, and he has done so publicly, internationally. He has absolutely no fear of the Biden administration nor the sanctions that Joe Biden is threatening Russia with. It's not a new thing. They don't care. How long are you going to keep sanctions on them when Europe will be frozen to death when Russia turns off the Nord Stream pipeline that was funded by the Biden administration at the cost of $11 billion in taxpayer money? This is insane, folks. And this is why this is why the Democratic Party doesn't want you to talk about these things. Because when you start paying attention to what they are doing and what they are not doing, then you start putting together a very complete picture. Kind of like when we look at Representative Angela Riley, who is more than happy to take pictures and be there for the photo shoot for an event to try and get her face out there. And she's more than happy to talk up Governor Hochul and other Democrats, but she doesn't care about her community enough to actually stop a moment and say, hey, let's talk about crime. Let's talk about the young man, a 17-year-old shooting an 18-year-old in our community. See, when you pay attention and you realize that they're not willing to do that she's more than happy to go and just toss out any kind of crap on Twitter, knowing that Twitter is going to back her because it's left-leaning, and she can just ignore the people, then yeah, we get a horrible government. We get a government that's absolutely miserable and useless. And that's very upsetting. I don't know, maybe you think I'm wrong. Again, you can call in at any point in time. You can leave a comment, as you can see now. We got the comments back up. I've been showing you before that you can comment on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter, on DLive. You can call into the show at 607-242-1582. There is no limitation. If you want to say, Mike, I think you're right, I think you're wrong, I think you misunderstand this part or the other, call in. Phone line is on. I want to hear your voice. This is about a conversation with you because I know people are watching this around the world, in the United Kingdom, in France, in Australia, in Canada, because they realize something. And I think this is really important. They realize that for every step that America takes towards authoritarian rule, the closer we become to being these democratic socialist nations like North Korea, like China, like every democratic socialist nation in the world, Venezuela. We lose more and more freedom in the world. And global violence goes up in the world. That's just, I can't say it is a fact. I can say that it seems to be a fact, that all evidence seems to point in that direction, that we see this recurring and recurring and recurring. That as the United States loses more and more freedom, we see the rest of the world lose even more freedom. See, we started off in America with all the freedom. You have the freedom of speech. You can say that the president, whomever that president may be, sucks. That you don't like them. That you think their politics are bad. That their policies are hurting the nation. You can say that in America. In the rest of the world, in less and less degrees, you start going to second world nations, third world nations, you lose the ability to be able to say that. Yes, you can say in England that you may think Boris Johnson is duplicitous in his COVID policies. You can say that you don't think he's very good with the economy. You can say that Macron, President Macron of France, doesn't know how to run the French economy. Yes, you can say that. Try and say that in Morocco. Try and say that in, Egypt. How about you go to Venezuela and try and argue about why their government is bad because people are eating in the streets out of garbage cans. Try and say it in those countries. See what happens. And by the way, you can't even do that because go down to Australia and try and complain about the government and its draconian pandemic legislation where they are literally taking people from their homes and locking them up. And you want to tell me that you think that when America becomes less free and we're the example the rest of the world is a derivative of, every other country in the world gives you less freedom based on where America is. If this is the line, whatever the line may be in the United States, if this is what freedom is, everybody else gets less than that. And if we keep losing it, then the rest of the world loses it too. Now, I do want to get to the comment. I know there's a big comment here. And this comes from Jeremiah, who says, the comments of Putin recently have put some truth to them. I know it was propaganda laced, but he stated, and I paraphrase, the U.S. has lost the moral high ground as they are imprisoning people from the January 6th protests without speedy trial. In gulag-type conditions like China and other countries in the past and present have. He knows this combined with a Zeta, furthest thing from Alpha, a Zeta male leader leads this, means this is a opportunity for him to expand power through oppression. Essentially, yes, and we heard this from China. China said the same thing, that the United States has no moral ground to speak on. Well, that's becoming more and more true. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. And it's truly troubling because the world is suffering from that. They're suffering big time. Look, Kazakhstan, the reason why the Russians went into Kazakhstan is because Joe Biden is sitting around and letting them take over the Ukraine. Because Russia, and because the United States isn't willing to stand up to Russia over taking over the Ukraine, Russia decided, well, if I can get one country, might as well get 2 or 3 countries. Why not expand my abilities? If no one is stopping them, if there is no serious threat to them, if there is no serious counter reaction to what they're doing, why in the world would they stop? The Biden administration has offered nothing except capitulation. The Biden administration is willing to bow down to Russia. Call Vladimir Putin a killer all you want. But if you're not willing to stand up when he decides that he's going to go into countries and try and take them over, then it doesn't matter if you call him a killer or not. He wins. I don't think that's too difficult for anyone in the world to understand. And that's why he's doing this. And that's why the rest of the world is paying attention. That's why we are seeing that American troops are being attacked right now in the Middle East because they see Joe Biden gave up Afghanistan. Joe Biden is bending to Russia. China is actively talking about taking over Taiwan. Iran is running ramshod all over the Biden administration as he is desperately trying to make the Iran nuclear deal because it would be the only positive thing he can point to in his campaign. And it's the only thing the Democrats would be able to point to try and justify why they maintain power. Why isn't everyone running all up and down the back of America? Talk about Zeta males. I mean, I'll give you a great example of how this even gets even worse. Do you remember back on August 5th, we made a video and we were speaking with you and we said, we cannot allow Andrew Cuomo to just walk away with $18.5 million in his pocket and not be charged for the crimes, the 11 sexual assault crimes, and the 16,000 people that he killed, and the fact that he also committed the corruption of him doing a cover-up of killing those 16,000 people. And we absolutely said that if he is allowed to just resign, to just walk away from being governor, that he is going to get away with the whole thing. Guess what? Governor Cuomo has gotten away with the whole thing. There is no case against Cuomo. No one is charging him with the 16,000 deaths because of what he did to the nursing homes and people in the nursing homes. He's not being charged on the 11 separate sexual assault charges that existed that were identified by Letitia James. He is not having the $18.5 million that he walked away with taken away from him. He has complete control over politics in New York State. And, oh God, I want to show you this. Come on. I want you to see this. Andrew Cuomo, Kathy Hochul, is now hiring. There it is. Well, I hope you saw it there. She's picking up Andrew Cuomo's choice to head the New York City transit system. Did you see that? So, Governor Cuomo kills 16,000 people, covers it up. The evidence is leaked and people are aware that he covered up the death of 16,000 people that he did because of politics. He also committed 11 separate sexual assaults as identified by the Democrat Attorney General Letitia James. These are facts. They're not questions. These are facts. It's all documented. He then resigns, and in resigning, he not only gets to have all charges dropped against him, he gets to keep all the money, and he has more political power than before. Kathy Hochul is still doing what Cuomo wanted. She's still doing what he put in place. She is still on his leash of power. The only thing that changed is no one else is looking at Cuomo and following what he's doing. He has more power now, and he is more free to use that power than ever before. James mentions the law doesn't mean anything if you have the right friends. It appears so. More and more, we are being shown that if you happen to be a Democrat a left-leaning Democrat, then you can get away with things like committing sexual assaults. You can go ahead and do things like kill 16,000 people. You can go and you can destroy property, and you can destroy buildings, and you can destroy cities, and you can lead to the death of people, and it's all okay because you have the right politics. And that's supposed to be freedom. And the Democrats want you to vote for that. That just doesn't make sense to me. Just doesn't. I don't know. Maybe you think I'm wrong. Maybe you think, Mike, you just don't get it. Okay, I don't get it. Explain it to me. Because I don't get it. And it's not just at the national level, because we're seeing these things, again, we're seeing this at local government levels as well as national, and everything in between. You know, I'm pointing out City Council, Binghamton City Councilwoman Angela Riley, but there's also Antonio Delgado, who we've spoken about on this program. There are people, there's, of course, you know, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is another example. There's Presley, Anna Presley, and Cori Bush. There's Kamala Harris. You can go through the government in so many levels and see these corrupt individuals who are promoting ideas that will destroy America. You know, and this is all being hidden from you. There's an article I saw earlier today that you probably haven't seen. The Price of Dissent. Reuters, one of the most respected news agencies in the world, has been basically pushing bias. They have been pushing a false narrative. They have lied to you because they have been putting out news that is not based on the truth. Where is it? And this is from an insider, a former high-end, this is from a former data specialist for Reuters, Mr. Kriegman, and he says, the new racial orthodoxy is slowly creeping into every aspect of daily life, from the Reuters newsroom to his son's elementary school classroom, which has been teaching a book called Race Cars, a story depicting a committee of white race cars that conspire to make sure that no black cars can win the big race. It's absolutely poisonous to this country. That Reuters is introducing far left politics into its news reporting, and that's the most trusted source. We're not talking about New York Times, which we know is left-leaning. We're talking about Reuters. It's like the Associated Press. They are considered neutral by everyone in the world. And that is a lie, because they are biasing information. That a 12,000-word report identifying and based on an in-depth data dive at Reuters shows that nope, they're completely biased towards BLM and the BLM mindset, that critical race theory mindset, and you are misinformed. That's the danger of all of this. You are being misinformed at every level, and there are people who are taking advantage of the fact of your lack of information, your lack of knowledge, your lack of understanding of the consequences of what's going on. And that's why we have illegal aliens going into our communities and committing 28 felony frauds, allegedly. Because, you know, New York State is a sanctuary city and it's all perfectly fine. I don't know. That upsets me so much. But maybe you think I'm wrong, folks. Maybe you think, Mike, you just don't know what you're talking about. Okay. Maybe that's what you think. Maybe you think the information I'm showing you, it doesn't make sense. I mean, let me ask you, does this all make sense? Does what I'm speaking about, does it make sense? Because if it doesn't, I mean, I understand. That's fine. If it doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense. But I think it does. I think it makes sense. And I think it's important. And I think it's very important for our freedom and for the freedom of the rest of the world. Because if the freedom doesn't exist here, it won't exist anywhere else. Because everywhere else has less freedom than what we have. I mean, that's just the case. There we go. I don't know, folks. It troubles me so. It troubles me because there's so much of this that I'm trying to explain, that I'm trying to get out there. And maybe it isn't, my fear is that I'm not conveying this properly. And some days I'm sure I do it better than other days. Some days I'm more defined than other days. Maybe that's the case. But I'm trying. I want to try and make sure that you know as much as possible, that it makes as much sense as possible, that you have as much evidence as possible, so that you can turn around and say, I want more freedom. I want the freedom, the right to speak. I want to be able to critique my elected officials. And whether you think that that elected official is doing a great job or a terrible job, that you are able to say that. And that people aren't looking at you and going, you can't say that because of the color of your skin. You can't say that because they don't like your political preference. Because if we can't do that here, I guarantee you, you can't do it in Canada. There is no free speech in Canada. You can be arrested for saying words that the government doesn't like in Canada. You can be arrested for saying words that the government doesn't like in the United Kingdom. You absolutely can be arrested for saying the wrong thing in Australia. And those are free nations. Imagine trying to say something in Zimbabwe or Rwanda. We haven't even gotten to Russia or North Korea or Venezuela. I'm talking about the in-between countries. Do you think you can get away with saying the things about critiquing your government more in, I don't know, Rhodesia than you can in the United States? I guarantee you, you can't. That is an absolute no, not gonna happen. And if we lose the ability here, I guarantee you there will be even fewer rights in those other countries. If America doesn't need to be that free, you definitely don't need to be that free in other countries around the world. Because that's how they look at it now. You don't need to be as free as the Americans. The United States has the Second Amendment. You don't have that in the rest of the world. You can't get that right in the rest of the world. And they're trying to take it away from you here. And if they take it away from you here, I guarantee you people in the other countries will have even less of a right, because they'll point to America and go, they don't even have that right. You definitely can't have that right. And then you get more oppression. And you get more authoritarianism. And authoritarianism leads to conflict as authoritarians try and take over more and more power and more land and more control, and they bump into other authoritarians that disagree with them, that want their land, want their power, and then you have wars. I'm hoping I'm explaining that concept well to you. When you have authoritarian powers that are bumping heads, you're more likely to have conflict and wars than when you don't. And when people have less freedom, they have less ability to stop their governments from becoming authoritarian. I hope that makes sense for people. Because that's part of the fear that I have. That's part of the path that we're going down. I don't know. But I want to hear your voices, folks. And I know, and please, you can make comments. James has been speaking. Jeremiah has been talking to us. We've had Nancy speaking to us, John Cordisco, Mr. X, who is a new voice, by the way. I don't call him Mr. X. So thank you for joining us, by the way, if I didn't mention it before. Bellin is speaking with us. Dal has been speaking with us. Hot Chicks is here. Jason's been watching. Ann is with us. You're not alone, folks. You're not the only voice that's out there. You're not the only person who feels like this, that is saying, why is it that we're watching members of our government at the local level that are happy to tell us things that we already know, things that you looked out the window, you could see there was ice on the roads. Okay, it's nice of her to say that, but when it comes to something far more important, like violence and murder and attempted murder that's happening in our community, they have nothing to say, that they won't make a comment, that they're more than happy to let that happen. And in fact, these same people are saying, hey, you know what the answer is? Let's have even less police. So it's harder to investigate things like the attempted murder that's going on in our community, so that we can have even less police to be able to arrest people for attempts at felony, at fraud. Yeah, that's the answer. We need less police to take care of those things, because that'll make it go away. Does that make sense to anyone? And I know Councilwoman Riley won't answer me on this. She will not respond to my comments about this. I've met Councilwoman Angela Riley before. I'm not saying she's a bad human being, but I am telling you she's a very political creature who is more concerned about her politics, in my opinion, than her community. And I've said that to her face, and I will say it to her face again, because I don't believe she's representing the people. She's representing politics. She's representing a political position. But that is no different than what we are seeing from Nancy Pelosi, from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, from Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. They're doing the same thing. They're not representing you. They're attacking you. They're attacking you and they're punishing you. Because that's what's happening with PayPal right now. When the IRS is going after PayPal to get your money because you spent $600 throughout the year, and PayPal now has to give away all of your financial secrets, everything you've done for the year. When they're trying to defund the police and allow criminals to have no consequences, or to have even less consequences than they have, to allow illegal aliens to run rampant through our communities and to abuse the public. It's upsetting, folks. It really is. And all the while, we have these politicians that are trying to tell us, no, you just don't understand. It's okay when our side does it, but it's not okay when your side decides to stand up for themselves. Or when your side says, this isn't right. No, that's when you are the bad guy. You're the bad guy if you don't think that protesters should not let up, that there shouldn't be. If you're upset that there aren't uprisings all across the country, like Nancy Pelosi has said, if you're the one who's saying that that's just not the way a democracy runs, well, then you're the problem. You're the villain. That's what they're telling you. And then they want you to vote for it. Dow says, nope, makes no sense at all. And also to reinforce the difference in definition between what is legal and what is lawful. Yeah. It's so upsetting, folks. It really is. And I know some days I'm better at the live stream than others, and I hope that this hasn't been a terrible live stream for everyone. I hope it's been informative. I tried to do my very best about that. But I find it so upsetting because I'm seeing this at the local level as well as the national level. Because I don't see a difference between hashtag J6 and the attempted murder in Binghamton, New York. And I guarantee you, we could look at Baltimore, or we could look at Chicago, or Detroit, or LA, and I can go through cities across the nation, and you can see the same things. We've got 22 cities that have been the social experiment of the Democratic Socialists, where they said, let's defund the police because the police are bad, because the police aren't doing what they want. And they want to get rid of it. And we saw what has happened in every single one of those cities, not just one, not just a couple of cases, in every single city where we have seen people like Cori Bush out of Minneapolis saying we've got to defund the police. We've seen the politicians using your tax dollars to provide themselves with private security costing $70,000 a year to give themselves walls around their homes like Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, and to protect themselves in private communities like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and you are left out to be in the wind. They don't care about you, they care about their power. Because fewer police means that they have more power over what is remaining. The less you can defend yourself, the more you're in trouble. Dow says it's upsetting. What is worse is the suppression of any constructive conversation that may get heated, may be passionate, but would result in action and real solutions and informed consent. Well, that's the thing. Again, Dow, I have never said I'm the only person with the right ideas. You've never heard me say that on this program. Week after week, I've never said I've got it right. I know it all. I keep asking over and over again, if I'm wrong, please tell me. If there is another way to see this, please let me know. If there is another conclusion to be made, please tell me that. And people who have watched this program week after week after week for 10 years, you know what? You don't hear the left telling you that, oh, no, you didn't get it right. When they're confronted, when they're asked the direct questions, they go, oh, well, you know what? Makes sense. You're right. Over and over again. How can I make that even more simple? Remember, we were told in New York State, we were promised in New York State by the New York State legislature run by the Democratic Party. We were promised by the disgraced former governor, Andrew Cuomo, that if we have red flag laws, that there wouldn't be shootings at schools. We were told that. We were promised that. They lied. That's a fact. They lied to you, to your face. They told you that if you have less freedom and you have less ability to defend yourself, that you would be safe. They lied. They said that the schools would be safe. They lied. That is a fact. Here's the news report right here from January 7th. It is a factual lie. You are not safer. We were told that if you passed the New York SAFE Act, that you would be safer, that if you had less Second Amendment rights, if you had less rights to defend yourself, like the Ninth Circuit Court has decided, that you would be okay. You're going to be safe. If you have less police, you're going to be okay. And here's the news right in front of you, and it says that they lied to your face. They lied to you. And rather than even be honest enough to address that, these politicians just, I didn't even see that. Didn't even know it happened. Oh well. And they go on about their day, not worried about you. Inflation is higher. They don't care. 6.8%. It's not that bad. The economy is having a historic run. We are on the precipice of the economic recovery of history. Does that sound like the Obama stimulus days, the summer of recovery, 2010? They said the same exact thing. We're going to have the best recovery ever. No one has ever done so well. And the country was devastated. Devastated. I'm just asking you to look at the consequences of what they're saying and to consider they don't know what they're talking about. And worse than that, they're using you to get power for themselves. Jeremiah mentions, seriously and possibly controversial question. Okay. If you are the victim, if modern democratic civilian warfare, i.e. financially ruined, destroyed reputation, economic opportunities gone, and left to suffer and grind in poverty and embarrassment, how much worse is physical death to that individual? In theory, the suffering will be greater for the individual and maintain a greater deterrent for people over time than the loss of life, which hits horrible and hard yet fades. The other warfare serves as a continuous reminder to never challenge the democratic authorities. Ashley Babbitt is gone, and few remember her name. General Flynn is alive, and his financially ruined is a lasting deterrent. That's an interesting question, Jeremiah. Let me say this. And I'm trying to think that through, but everyone fears death. Everyone fears death, and that's a good thing. Everyone wants to live as long as possible. And anything that would destroy your life, and that same concept, that fear of death, in the modern age, as we are learning to deal with social media, people fear their social media death too. This is a hypothesis. So this isn't scientific. This is me thinking about it. And I think to a certain extent, especially for the youth of today, who equate their lives with their social media lives. Their likes on social media equal their likes in their life. They consider people that like them on social media as being their friends. They see that as being the same thing. That's their social interaction. And so to die on social media, to be unfriended, to be made a non-person on social media is the same thing as having a death. That's power. And using that mental state to silence people is effective, because as much as it is bad to be poor, as much as it is bad to be oppressed, it is worse to be dead. I have been homeless. It sucks. It's a horrible way to live. There's no question about that. But it is worth to be dead. You can come back from poverty. You can struggle and survive and bring yourself back from being homeless. You can't bring yourself back from death. So the power that they are wielding is a form of death. It's a destruction of your life. If you are destroyed, you can't rebuild that because it's over. So I think that's part of the psychology that they use and are using against us, especially the youth. Jason mentions that's why with rules for radicals, they recruit the ones that have nothing to lose. Well, yeah. When you have people who don't care about death, they don't have self-preservation in mind, there's no limit. Which is also why we need police, and that's why we need laws, and we need to enforce them, because there are deranged individuals in the world, and those deranged individuals have no limits. And if we're not willing to enforce the laws, then people who are willing to do horrendous things, like killing 164 people for political gain, as Russia is doing in Kazakhstan, as they're taking over the Ukraine, as Russia is doing, and land grabbing. If there's no one there to say, no, you can't do that, nothing stops them. I hope that makes sense. I hope that makes sense for people. And I hope it makes sense when I compare what is an actual insurrection versus the propaganda of an insurrection. The propaganda is what we are getting from Nancy Pelosi. It's what we're getting from members of Congress. It's what we've been getting from Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. That's propaganda. It's manipulation. We've seen insurrections around the world. That isn't what's happening in America. If anything, what's happening in America is what has always happened in America. People speak up about their leadership for and against it and say, hey, do better, make our country better, do your jobs. I don't know. Dow says most radicals don't have anything to lose because they have surrendered themselves to the adopted ideology, believing that they gain power and influence after the revolution. It is my experience, and history has shown that some of the first people, whenever there is a coup that actually happens, whenever there are people who've been taken over, when authoritarians get in power, not only do they kill their opponents, they kill some of their own people. When you think about the Russian Communist Party, and when they took power, they killed swaths of their own people. Because if those, and the reason for that is, and why it almost never happens, there's always a handful of people that stay, but the remaining people, the people who actually made the change in their governments, they get killed en masse because if they were good enough to get the last regime out, they're good enough to get the new regime out. So they kill them. They wipe them out. They get rid of them en masse because the new regime knows that what they said isn't true. These new regimes are almost never, if they have to use violence, if they have to use coup attempts to take over, we don't see coup attempts for the better. You don't see someone say, oh, well, we're going to take over the Philippines, or we're going to take over Jakarta, or we're going to take over South America, whichever country. And they say, okay, we're going to have this coup, and then we're going to give up the guns and become pacifists. That doesn't happen. Doesn't happen. Never happened in the history of the world. Does not happen. So, that's something to take in mind. Jason mentions that's also why politicians keep telling Black Americans that you can't get ahead because of systemic racism, to use them as weapons. Well, not so much as weapons, but voting tools. That's why you can't be Black and be Republican. You can't be Black and be conservative. You can't be Black and vote against Democrats. That's considered a crime. It's considered you're a traitor to your race. If you dare to be independent, to think and say, I have actual reasons, principles that say I should vote for this person over that person. No, you're expected. It is demanded. You must do this. Look at Roland Martin. Listen to Al Sharpton. Look at what's on TV every day. Listen to Don Lemon. Tell me where they're open-minded about their ideologies. Why do you think so many of Hollywood and the news media jumped behind Jussie Smollett as he made the most obvious hoax in the universe, the biggest lies, and said, it's true. They believed it because well, he's a black man and a Democrat, and so we have to believe him. And he's supporting our political ideology, so we have to support him. Even when he's lying to your face, because they don't mind them lying to your face. Just like I showed you, and by the way, all the links are going to be in the description so you can see it for yourself, but it's just exactly the same thing as what we're seeing over at Reuters. They are willing to manipulate the information, to ignore all data, to send a message out, to be very specific, to promote an ideology, a left-leaning ideology that will change your life forever. And it is changing your life in little ways and in big ways. Dow mentions, very true, Night of the Long Knives, yes. Kristallnacht. These authoritarian ideologies still play down the aftermath if they achieve their aims, knowing that useful idiots will always be available and expendable. And they always are. And in every regime change, we see this always the same way. But if you think I'm wrong, tell me. Because I can tell you from my experience in being in the middle of a coup attempt and watching the authoritarian government try to crush the people and watching how that happened and seeing the aftermath of that in my actual firsthand experience, it informs me about what I'm seeing now. And I can tell you that Democrats are trying to do the same thing that the RFGC tried to do in Russia in 91. To lie to the people and to take power. This is just a less violent version of that. Relatively less violent. And they've been at it for a while. Let me ask you folks, what do you think about what's going on in the world? Do you think that Joe Biden is paying enough attention to international politics? Do you think that the leaders around the world are seeing Joe Biden and saying, oh, wow, he's a strong leader, we can't do anything? Or are they saying, Joe Biden is so weak and deluded and Kamala Harris is so useless that we can go out and we can do anything? Do you think the temperature in the world, the violence in the world is growing or decreasing right now? Which one do you think is happening? Because I think it's getting worse. Because Joe Biden is weak and he's so busy trying to protect his party, trying to protect his elections for him and his party in 2022, that actually protecting people, that's on the wayside. That's an afterthought. Just like he didn't care about the 479 Americans that we know were in Afghanistan and were trying to get out. And it could be as many as 2,000 Americans that he abandoned in Afghanistan that he didn't care about, he still doesn't care about, that they still won't talk about. And the world's seeing that and saying, well, if you don't care about your own people to that extent, you don't care about anything that we do, and then get away with anything. I mean, you may disagree with me, and that's perfectly fine. I'm not telling people, see, I'm not a member of the far left. I'm not a member of Progressive Leaders of Tomorrow or BLM or Antifa. I'm not a democratic socialist. I don't require you to agree with everything that I say. I don't require you to believe what I believe. They do. And just for that reason alone, you should question them as much as you might question me. You absolutely should. If someone is telling you you can't have another point of view based on your color of skin, that they're telling you that you only have one option because they won't tell you any other information, they won't listen to any other thought, they won't pay attention to where logic leads them. If they won't do that, then there's a problem there, not with you, Not with you asking a question, it's with them refusing to be able to address that. And we need to hold our politicians accountable. God help me, we need term limits. We need term limits in this nation so bad. At every elected office, from the local to the national, every single elected position should be term limit. I would say 6 years. If you can't do whatever it is you're trying to do in 6 years, you don't deserve to be there a day longer. I don't care who you are. I don't care what party you're in. I say this for Republicans and Libertarians and Democrats alike. I don't care what party you're in. If you can't accomplish your goals in 6 years, goodbye. You don't get to come back. 6 years is a lot of time to get a lot of things done. And if everyone is limited to that 6-year time frame, everyone is going to work as hard as they can to get the best things done that they can. Now, that doesn't mean you can't go from, say, city council to legislature to run for Congress. Fantastic, do it. I'm not saying you can't continue in politics. I'm not saying that you can't continue to try and advance your goals in politics. I'm saying you just can't do it in the same position for 50 years, which is most of Congress. Good half of Congress has been there for 3 decades or more. That's ridiculous. They failed for 3 decades. Why are they still there? I mean, think about Kirsten Gillibrand. In the entire time that Kirsten Gillibrand has been in office, that's since 2009, when she was appointed to replace Hillary Clinton, what has she actually done? She named a post office. That's what Kirsten Gillibrand has done. She named a post office and ran for the presidency. She is useless. Point blank, she's useless. Why is she still there? Why do we have her? Term limits are absolutely necessary. Nancy Pelosi she's telling us things that you wouldn't. If a car salesman said to you, just sign the contract, we'll figure it out afterwards, you would say no. If someone asked you to sign any kind of business contract and they said, we'll fill out the details after you sign it, we'll figure it out after the fact, you'd say no. Nancy Pelosi told you, don't worry, pass the bill and we'll see what's in it afterwards. Why is she still in office? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez says, hey, we need to build a train that goes from California to Hawaii. Why in the world do we have her still in office? She is an idiot. Yes, building a train to go from California to Hawaii is idiocy. That is idiotic. You may like the idea. You may say climate change is important. I'm telling you, trying to build a train from California to Hawaii is idiotic. It is unrealistic. And for someone to actually say that that's what we need to spend all of our money on, it is, I wish I could say it was even fanciful. It is just mind-bogglingly dumb. And that's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And she's one of the most powerful women in Congress. She's one of the most powerful people in Congress. And she hasn't passed anything either. Thank God. Term limits. Get rid of them. Why do we have these people in place? We need term limits. God, we need term limits. Look at, what do we get for not having term limits? We get to have a senile man sitting in the White House. We get to have Kamala Harris, who's so desperate for power, she's willing to say anything, but she does nothing. What has she accomplished? We can go down a list, and you can say that about Republicans as well. I'm not just saying this about Democrats. I think they all should be term limited, every single member, and hold them to that. Dow mentions that communism likes massive infrastructure expenditure projects. Yeah, that's, well, again, who's a democratic socialist? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. What is democratic socialism? North Korea, China, Russia. That's democratic socialism. That's what they are. So, yeah, they love these big, huge projects that they promise are going to take care of everything, and they never do. I mean, yes, North Korea has a hypersonic missile. That's a big project. It works for them. They have the ability, they are building the ability to have a hypersonic 5 times the speed of sound, a missile, an ICBM that would be able to target the United States and Israel and our allies in Europe. That's what they're building right now. But they're not feeding their people. Their people are starving. You know, ooh, they built the missile, but their people are dropping dead of starvation. I think they're, maybe it's just me, but I think their priorities are in the wrong places. And yeah, you're right, Dow. Dow mentions that that this needs to be a symbol of power of the people in these socialist countries. It's part of their idea that they make these monuments to the greatness of their ideology. That's why we see, it's kind of like BLM putting up statues throughout America because of their ideology. They're putting up statues of George Floyd because, ooh, see how great he is? See how great our idea is? Do you see the statue of this great man? George Floyd was a miserable criminal. He was a violent criminal. And he's not a hero. He's not a martyr. He was just a criminal. Should he have died the way he died? No. He's still a criminal, a vicious criminal who is not a hero and should never be looked up to by anyone for any reason. Period. If you think I'm wrong on that, I'd love to hear your argument and tell me how George Floyd was a benefit to his community. Please explain that to me. And the legacy of George Floyd is dozens of people dead, thousands of police officers injured, billions of dollars in damage across this country, and the destruction of our social infrastructure. Yeah, I'll have that argument. Someone wants to have that argument? Let's have that discussion. Dow mentions that the ideology coming from China and the socialists is it's better to have a 6-mile underwater tunnel than to have 6 million people free, healthy, and able to feed themselves. Yeah, that is a communist ideology. I don't agree with it, obviously. But that's why they like their big projects. That's why they like their big statues. That's why they like to claim that everything they do, it's for the people. It's for the people, but the people are starving in their nations. The people are, you know, the quality of life in the United States is pretty much the highest in the world. And that's because we're free. And in nations which say everyone gets what they need, the quality of life is lower. That what you need isn't what we have. You don't get to have a car, a house, a TV, the cell phones. You don't get to have that in a nation like China, like Russia when it was under the Soviet Union, like Venezuela. Hell, in Venezuela, you don't even get to feed yourself. There's a problem here. But, you know, it's because people are afraid to actually stand up and say something. I don't think we are not alone in the way we think. Not that everyone agrees with me. Not everyone agrees with the way I see the world or the conclusions I make. And that's a good thing. Because I'm a human being. I'm flawed. I'm not perfect. That's okay. But more people tend to agree with more of the ideas, especially if they actually get to speak with me long term and flesh out these ideas, as I do. Some people come after the show. They come to the Belmar. They speak with me after the fact, talking about some of the things we've talked about here and really looking at these things. And I've had conversations with people of every political party, every political faction for years. And more people tend to agree because it makes sense. Rather than when we see these politicians dictating to us what our choices are and not allowing us to have any other freedom and any other choice whatsoever. Agent Black, it's good to see you. Up late over in the United Kingdom, I see, and thank you for that. Agent Black mentions the infrastructure projects are always substandard, unsafe because of the corruption too. Substandard materials, shortcuts, etc. That wouldn't catch me in that tunnel. Absolutely, you're right, Agent Black. Because when it's being done in this, it's about the image. It's not about the truth. And that's true what we see in politics. Boris Johnson is about the image of politics. He's made many, many decisions, especially in reference to the pandemic, that make no sense whatsoever. But it looks good. And it's on the side that the major left-leaning news media agrees with. And that's a problem. And we see that in the United States constantly. It sounds good. The Green New Deal sounds nice, but it's stupid. Biden's Build Back Better sounds like it's something interesting. It's useless. Useless. If you actually look at the bills and you actually look, and that's the thing, they don't expect that anyone's going to pay attention to the details. They're expecting you not to pay attention. They're expecting no one to actually speak up and say, hey, I've been in a coup attempt. And I can tell you that January 6th wasn't a coup attempt. Hey, I live in a community where violence is increasing and we need more police. They don't expect that anyone's going to say that. They don't expect anyone's going to say, I have watched, I look at the data and I see that when you stop people from being able to defend themselves, from being able to own bulletproof vests, or from women being able to arm themselves so they can protect themselves from sexual assault, that makes it worse for people. When you allow politicians to be able to commit crimes and then and have no consequence for that, like former disgraced Governor Cuomo, that leads to more corruption. Doesn't make things better. But they don't expect us to say that. They expect us to be silent, to sit back, to do nothing. That's very upsetting. By the way, I did want to mention something off track, something else. For many people, we've covered this story, and I want to continue to cover it because we talked about the protests that have happened as a result of this. The stores, the locations where the staff have been accused of committing sexual assault, those businesses are reopening at this time. And at this time, the investigation, which continues to be going forward, has not arrested anyone. So we will say again to everyone, if you have evidence, not rumor, not the comments on Facebook, but actual evidence that a sexual assault occurred in Binghamton at these locations, then please contact the police and provide them with that evidence so that justice can be done. Because I believe in protecting women and allowing women to protect themselves. I believe women should be trained to be able to use firearms so that they can protect themselves against a man who outweighs them. But that wouldn't help them if they've been drugged. And if they've been drugged, well, that's just a miserable crime. And that is the lowest life form that has done that. And they need to be punished to the fullest extent of the law. So if this has happened, because, again, this has not gone to court yet, so the allegations are out there. And if those allegations of sexual assault are true, then we need to punish these people to the fullest extent of the law. That means we need evidence. Not rumor, evidence. And I hope that evidence does appear, if there is guilt, that the evidence does appear and that these people are convicted to the fullest extent of the law. So I wanted to make sure people shared that thought. It's not enough to just be a mob and run around and scream and shout and say that you're going to burn down buildings like progressive leaders of tomorrow have done. That's not good. That's a crime as well. That's devolving the situation. It's part of the reason why the violence in the community is increasing, because we have mob justice going on. We have people who are not relying on the police because we're teaching our children not to trust police and to trust a mob that's motivated by politics instead. That's insanity. That's self-destruction. And that's being exported to other countries. That same mentality of not trusting police, that the police are racist, that, and I'm not saying police are perfect, but we're putting out this idea like they are inherently and absolutely something like the Gestapo, and they're not. That is not the case overwhelmingly in the first world nations like the United Kingdom and France and in America, although it is very true in Australia and in New Zealand, and to a growing extent in Canada. But that's when we have to say, well, one, term limits. Two, we have to be involved. We have to speak up. We can't be afraid of being unpersoned on social media. At least that's the way I think about it. You may tell me that I'm wrong. And that's okay. If you think I'm wrong, tell me why. As you can see, people are reaching us. Agent Black mentions out of the UK, he says, the UK police corruption is common on differing levels. Again, I'm not saying there isn't corruption in police. You're right, Agent Black. I've spoken to many people, and I respect that your father was a police officer. And I understand there are good and bad people, and it doesn't take a lot of bad people to create a lot of bad situations. It doesn't take a lot of them. It takes very few. Just like when we have a mob. When we have a mob, it doesn't take a lot of people to cause a bad situation. Remember back on May 2020, that isn't the entire mob there that's trying to cause a problem, that are trying to increase the net violence. It wasn't a large number of people who were destroying buildings throughout all of Washington, D.C. back in June of 2020, burning down buildings. It wasn't everyone that was involved in destroying Minneapolis or Portland or Seattle. It wasn't everyone who killed the child, the 6-year-old in Atlanta. It's one or two people. But those one or two people have a lot of power. But we need to stand up and say, okay, let's emphasize the good people and denounce the bad people. And let's punish the bad people for the crimes they commit when they commit them based on the evidence of law and not mobs. Because mobs always inevitably give us situations like this, which eventually leads to shootings like this, rather than any kind of image of hope or peace. That's just life. So I understand corruption is real. There's corruption in the police, there's corruption in government, there's corruption in business, there's absolutely corruption in politics. But we can't be defined by that. Because that's not, as much as people want to tell us it's systemic, it's not. Because human beings aren't inherently corrupt. I understand that critical race theory, which is being exported to around the world, relies on the idea that you have to believe that people are born evil, that white people are evil by birth and black people are victims by birth, and you cannot change that. I refuse to accept that. I refuse to accept that ideology And that's why I also refuse to say that all police are corrupt, all politicians are corrupt. I don't think that's everyone. I think that can become everyone, but I don't know that that is everyone. Dow mentions that bad actors persecute the overall institution and system of law enforcement. Those that would be respectable and lawful officers are forced out or leave. What follows is the recruitment of the corrupt. And Agent Black follows up with some police units are inherently corrupt. London's TSG and the SO15. I'm not familiar, Agent Black, I'm not familiar with those units of police in Great Britain or in London, so I can't speak to that. So I don't know about those organizations. I can say that, yeah, if we demonize good people when they try to do good things, we're not going to have people trying to do good things as often. Just logic. If every time you reach for, I don't know, every time you try and lift someone out of the mud, you get smacked on the hand, you're going to stop trying to lift that person up from the mud. You're just going to leave them there. That's human nature. We're going to avoid the pain, but that's a problem. And we need to change that mentality. We have to change that outlook. We have to stop hitting everyone just because they're a police officer, or just because they're white, or just because they're conservative, or just because they're a Republican or a libertarian. What? Because Democratic Socialists are gods? They're geniuses? I think not. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez proves that. Cori Bush, Anna Presley, they proved that. The way police in other, Jason mentions that the way police in other are enforcing the COVID, enforcing the vaccines mandates is not a good thing. Well, if you're talking about Australia, I agree with you absolutely. But I think there's a big difference between Australia and the United States on that. Jeremiah mentions, yes, the TSG, the London police unit mentioned by Agent Black, is corrupt and politicized. Again, Jeremiah, like I mentioned to Agent Black, I'm not familiar with that unit. I do follow a lot of news overseas. I do follow a lot of news in the United Kingdom. I follow things more like what's happening with Jeremy Corbyn, or say Boris Johnson, the policy initiatives, but I don't know about the police as much. So that could be true. I don't know. I'm willing to say when I don't know something, when I don't have enough evidence or knowledge. It's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to say you just don't know. All right, folks. We've been here for 2 hours and 43 minutes. Do they start? Agent Black and others are mentioning that that certain police units are starting violence. And if that is the case, they need to be removed. Yes, I back the blue, but I back the blue when the blue does the right thing. When police officers do the wrong thing, when they have committed crimes, when they have committed violence, when they are corrupt, that's not a police officer, that's a criminal. And treat them like criminals. But when they are doing the right thing, like they're trying to stop riots, they're trying to stop cities from being burned down, when they're trying to protect the people, like in Minnesota or Portland or Seattle or Washington, D.C., or Chicago or Detroit or Baltimore or L.A. or New York City, overall, when they're trying to stop that, I tend to side with them a lot more than the criminals that are committing the crimes. I'm just not a fan of criminals. I don't want to elevate criminals and look at them as martyrs. I don't look at George Floyd as a good guy. I don't look at Rashard Brooks as a good guy. He's not. I'm not looking at, what's his name out of Kenosha. He's not a good guy. These aren't good people. And for the media to impugn or imply that they are is just insulting. To see people saying we need statues of George Floyd, that's stupid. He's a criminal. So, again, I wouldn't support corrupt police, but I'm definitely not going to support absolute criminals either. And I don't think America should do that. I don't think the world should do that. I think we should be very honest with ourselves and say, what happened to George Floyd is a bad thing. Yes, George Floyd also is a bad person. He's a criminal. He died in a bad way, but he was a bad person, period. Absolutely. Should he be rotting in a cell for the rest of his life? Yeah, he should. Absolutely. He was a piece of dirt. Did he deserve to die the way he did? No. Everyone deserves to die with some kind of dignity. But, my sympathies are short on that. So Jeremiah is mentioning that he is aware of a contact from Australia of an event happening in Townsville, that they're not following lockdowns. That their people are fighting against the government in Australia about lockdowns that are happening in that country. And Agent Black out of the UK says any criminal should be brought to justice, whatever position they occupy. I agree with that completely. Whether it's a politician, a member of law enforcement, member of the military, doesn't matter. That's why I said it wasn't long ago, a couple months ago, when I was calling for General Milley to be tried for treason because of his actions. But because he is one of the Joint Chiefs of the Pentagon, he's protected. That man should be out on treason. He should be tried for treason, and he should be in jail, and he should be forced out of his position. He should not retire. He should be just gone. He is absolutely criminal and derelict in his duty, and I think that's something who should be affected by that. I think that's true of any person of any position, but that's not what we're seeing in the current administration. There is this weird thing, Dow mentions that there is this weird thing happening. Violent criminals are being afforded grace and elevation. Minor criminals are being ignored. But God help you if you are you're a political dissident in opposition to the current administration. Well, that's the part of this story, and I hope everyone was noticing it, and I didn't really focus on it as much. The guy, the illegal immigrant in Owego, New York, who was arrested for 28 felonies, he was released. He got arrested for 28 alleged felonies of fraud, 28 counts. And they let him walk out the door so that he can show up on his own recognizance. The judge, that's Justice Grinage, or Grenage, I don't know how his name is pronounced, Justice Grenage released him on his own recognizance because of bail reform. The guy commits 28 frauds. Is an illegal alien, and he's released out into the public. Do you think he's going to show up? Do you think he's trustworthy at all? See, that's the minor criminals. Bail reform, let them all out. And it's okay. And they commit more and more crimes. And they encourage people to commit more and more crimes. Because if there is no consequence to the crimes, then what's the point? You're not going to be punished for committing a crime. Why do we even have the laws? We have anarchy. It's upsetting. when we're elevating criminals to martyrdom, creating statues and people bowing down to George Floyd. Oh, we have to change the world because of George Floyd. First of all, why would we change the world because of a criminal, a drug dealer in the United States? There's no reason any other country in the world should change anything. There's no reason why the United States should change anything. He's a drug dealing criminal. Shouldn't change things. He's not the reason why things should change. He just isn't. You don't have to agree with it. You don't have to agree with me. You can think I'm wrong. That's fine. I'm okay with that. I don't think the world should change because a drug dealer died. A violent drug dealer died. I'm sorry. I don't think the world should change because of that. Call me insensitive. All right, we have 9 minutes, folks. We have 9 more minutes. And if you want to call in, you can call into 607-242-1582. In addition, if you've made it this far into the program, please do consider, you've been with me for 3 hours or part of that 3 hours, please consider to like, share, and subscribe to allow other people to be able to reach us. We're hoping to hit a goal this year of 1,234 subscribers on YouTube. We're looking to get close to those numbers on Odyssey and Rumble and BitChute. But please help us with your support. It's free, costs nothing. Lend us your support. Help us show that, there's more of us that all agree, that we have more in common than not. We just want to hit 1,234 subscribers. That's the idea. Agent Black mentions the YouTube link shows cover up of murder of 3 children by state. I don't know which link that is. So I'm not sure which incident you're speaking about, Agent Black. And I'm not sure if that's something that's only visible overseas or if it's something in the United States. But don't worry. Hey, Bellin, thank you for that. Thank you for your support. We thank all of our viewers from all across the world. I know we have people in Sweden and France and India that watch the program down in Peru. And we appreciate each and every one of you guys. We really do. And we thank you for watching our shows throughout the week. 2213 times 7. Okay, I'll have to check that out. Agent Black is just referring to something directly. Oh, by the way, I do have a Discord. The Discord is No Soundbites Allowed, hashtag 8620. So again, our Discord, I'll put it into the comment here just so people can know. You can reach us on our Discord. We just got that. And give me 1 second. That's our... Did that show up? Why is it having trouble with that? Hang on. Let me put the Discord up so people can see it. Yes, I'm horrible at typing. That's true. My typing is terrible. All right. Dow mentions it's going to be very turbulent next few years. There's going to be backlash, and if the Democratic Socialists don't solidify their position in power soon, it's going to be horrible for them. Well, yes, I do agree that we're going to see a lot of changes. In 2022, we're going to see Democrats lose many seats in Congress and in the Senate. And the nation's going to get more divided. And we're going to see even less done than Congress has been doing, which is the bare minimum. It's going to be troubling. That's not a positive. I mean, I'm glad. I want to see more Republicans in there. I think the Democrats have done a horrendous job. Look at the economy. Look at the national debt. Look at the inflation rate. We're in trouble. But I think it's going to get worse. I do believe. There's a reason why there's more and more people talking about, from the left, the progressives, the right. Everyone's talking about a second civil war in the United States. And I think it might be true. How about this, folks? By the way, for those who are in the Southern Tier region, very often after the program, we do go off and we go over to the right around 6:30 thereabouts, about an hour after the show. We go to the Belmar Pub, which is run by one of my good friends, and I do respect and love that job, his business, and I do go there every Sunday and try and enjoy it. I know there's a music band this week, today, that is playing. They start at about 6:30, and so if you wanted to see me in person and to have a little bit more of this conversation, or on issues that we can't talk about here on YouTube or on Facebook or Twitter, you can reach me there. Dow mentions I also have to be careful that we don't participate in a swing to extremes in other directions. Well, if you notice, I'm not asking people to be extremists. And I think I have said clearly on the program that we have to avoid extremism. I think that's important. But we do need to change direction. And the thing is, a lot of people have come to believe that not continuing down the only path that is being put before us is extremism. It's the same thing with like what we saw at SUNY Broom. When we did that show, and you can look up the video, just type in SUNY Broom into YouTube and you'll see the coverage that we did of a live event. The way that the left is wording it now, they want you to believe that anyone who does not agree is an extremist, which is a lie. Not agreeing with the message from the news media, from specific politicians who have a political agenda, does not equate to, well, that's a lie. That you're extremist. That you don't know what you're talking about. That's not true. Extremism is bad, absolutely. And I'll denounce extremism, as I always have. Any violent organization, any organization that promotes violence and needs threats to be able to achieve its goals, I think that's wrong. I denounce that. I think it's evil, which is why I don't believe in BLM. I don't agree with the progressive leaders of tomorrow. I don't support Antifa. I don't believe in these organizations that use violence and threats of violence to try and achieve their ends, to force people to believe something that they don't believe. I don't agree with that. And I would say that for the right as well. But the reason why I focus so much on the left is because, one, they're in power, two, they control the media, and three, they're the ones who are doing all the damage. I mean, really, when we look at this, I'll show it to you again. Because let's remember, this is what the left does on a regular basis. We've seen this for years now. This is what the result is of the left. These are left-leaning, and this is coming from the Washington Post. This is what we have seen in cities around our nation over and over again. This is coming from the left. So if I'm focusing on, the left more than anyone else, it's because, well, look who's been doing it. Why am I going to pick on someone who isn't running around and destroying our cities? Why am I going to complain about people who aren't attacking other people because of their political beliefs and aren't exporting these extremist ideologies into the rest of the world? Agent Black says, insane number 5661, please send Discord invite. Oh, okay. Okay, I probably typed it wrong. I will definitely get it out to you. Thank you. That's for the Discord, folks. So I may have typed it wrong. It's brand new. So, oh, yeah, no wonder. I have an I in there. Duh. I told you, I'm horrible at typing. I just noticed exactly why I got it wrong. Or why I think I got it wrong. I typed it wrong. It should be an O. That's better. Okay. You know, because I'm an idiot and I don't know how to type. Some days I get it wrong. But going to Dow's comment about this, extremism is important to watch out. But the United States isn't going to become 1940s Germany just because we don't decide to follow critical race theory to its logical conclusion, which is socialism. If we don't follow this racist ideology of the far left, if we don't become democratic socialists, does not mean that we must, as a result, become 1930s, 1940s Germany. That's not the way it works. That's not the reality. You love to hear how the left likes to say, well, the country, the right is destroying everything. No, it's not. And that's just not a reality. But they want you to demonize anything that isn't. That's like a cult. They're like a cult. You're demonized for being different. How dare you? You can't think different. You can't do different. That should tell you there's a problem. If you can't think, if you can't ask questions, if you can't try and understand, and you're only there to obey, how are you different than a slave? How are you free? How is it to your benefit? How is it to your benefit if everything you're doing is just obeying? And what they're telling you to obey is how to be more violent, more racist, more separatist, more secluded, more isolated. I mean, that's classically what cults do, don't they? And yes, I am currently just now comparing democratic socialism and progressivism to a cult. Yes, I am. Because they have a lot of similar tendencies. Isolate individuals, have a programmed thought process. They have martyrs of their own. They sanctify people based on their ideology. They keep people separated from others, and they denounce any views that aren't their own, even to the extent of violence in that promotion. Yeah. BLM, Antifa, progressive leaders of tomorrow. Yeah, they're cults. And if you think I'm wrong, well, next week you can tell me exactly why. Every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I'm here live with you to talk about it. And if you think I'm wrong, and you think, even if you want to say it in the comments afterwards, tell me, man, why do you think? If you think that Antifa or BLM or Progressive Leaders of Tomorrow, otherwise known as PLOT, the Democratic Socialists of America, especially the Ithaca chapter, if you don't think those are cults, tell me why. Because I think they're more like cults than they are not. I truly do. I truly do. That doesn't mean all the people are bad, but I do think the goal of those organizations is very cult-like. Not everyone will agree. All right, folks. So if you haven't, if you want, you can see me down in the Belmar. I'll be there in about an hour. Otherwise, you can reach me on Discord. Like Agent Black, I know you can't make it out. But one day I'll get back either over to the United Kingdom. I've been out there before. But maybe I can get back out to the United Kingdom. We'll have a pint, or you can come into the U.S. and I can show you some of the great dive bars we have here that I love so much. But otherwise, you can reach us on the Discord. Of course, look forward to your comments. You'll see links for everything I've been speaking about. And folks, I look forward to seeing you next Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'll talk to you again very soon. And look for the various videos we'll do throughout the rest of the week. Thank you.